They say the quietest homes hold the loudest secrets. Mine is screaming. For 50 years, I've lived in this sprawling, silent house in Bellevue, Washington, a monument paid for by my husband's work and my silence. If you think your family has drama, wait until you hear what my children are planning for Mother's Day. It involves my inheritance, a cult-like brunch, and a plot to erase me from my own life. This isn't just a story, it's a war, and it starts with a single phone call. Stick with me, and I promise you, you won't see the ending coming. Follow, like, and hit that notification bell because the truth is about to burn this perfect life to the ground. The sound cuts through the stillness of a Thursday morning. It's a shrill, digital chime that feels alien in a house built on old money and older lies. For a moment, I let it ring, an unwelcome guest in the tomb I call home. The silence here is a living thing, a heavy blanket I've worn for decades. The phone is an intrusion. I am Mia. I am 80 years old and my world is about to crack open. I pick up the receiver, my hands steady, a lifetime of practice in maintaining composure. Hello? Mia? It's Emma. My daughter-in-law's voice. It's always so smooth, like polished marble, beautiful and cold. It's a voice engineered for school fundraisers and charity galas. A voice that never cracks, never betrays an ounce of genuine feeling. It's the voice she uses when she's about to deliver a verdict, disguised as a suggestion. Emma, how are you? I ask, my own voice a bit rusty from disuse. Sometimes I go a full day speaking only to the delivery person from Amazon. I'm wonderful, Mia. Thank you for asking. Listen, I'm calling about Sunday. Sunday, Mother's Day. The annual command performance at their sterile, minimalist mansion on the lake. The one day a year, I am trotted out like a family heirloom, dusted off and put on display to prove that Liam, my son, is a dutiful man who remembers his aging mother. Yes, I say, a knot tightening in my stomach. There's a particular cadence to Emma's voice when she's about to be cruel. It gets a little higher, a little sweeter. It's the voice of a hummingbird with a stinger. Well, Liam and I were talking, she begins, the royal we she always uses as if their thoughts are a single, impenetrable entity. And we've decided to do something a little different this year, a bit more intimate. I wait. The silence on my end of the line is a weapon I learned to wield long ago. Don't fill it. Let them expose themselves in the void. Emma clears her throat, a tiny, delicate sound. It's just that, well, it's a celebration for the mothers in our circle, you know, the younger ones. We're focusing on the next generation this year, celebrating their journey. Her words are carefully chosen, each one a tiny, polished stone dropped into a deep well, a celebration for the mothers in our circle. The implication is clear. I am no longer in that circle. I am outside of it, a satellite whose orbit has finally decayed. I see, I say. The two words are flat, devoid of emotion. Inside, a cold fury is beginning to uncoil. It's an old, familiar feeling, one I have suppressed for half a century. We just feel, she continues, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy, that you'd be more comfortable at home. It can be so loud, so overwhelming. All the children, the chaos. We worry about you, Mia. We really do. The insult is a physical blow. It lands squarely in my chest, knocking the air from my lungs. More comfortable at home, in this mausoleum, alone. The lie is so audacious, so breathtakingly condescending, that for a moment, I am almost impressed. They aren't just uninviting me. They are framing it as an act of kindness, an act of protection. Then comes the final twist of the knife. In fact, she says, her tone brightening as if she's about to reveal a wonderful surprise. We've been doing some research. Liam found the most wonderful place not far from us. It's called the Golden Meadows. It's more of a luxury senior living community. They have water aerobics and a book club. We thought it might be time to start thinking about a transition, a place where you'd have support, companionship. The Golden Meadows. It sounds like a graveyard for pets. They have already replaced me. They have already picked out my next cage, a gilded one where I can be warehoused and forgotten. My needs subcontracted to strangers in neat uniforms. This isn't just about getting rid of me for a single brunch. This is the end game. This is about erasing me completely. And I know why. It's not about my comfort. It's not about the noise. It's about what the brunch really is. My mind flashes with an image of their living room, not filled with laughter and family, but with a quiet, unnerving reverence. Liam standing before the large, framed photograph of his father, raising a glass. The other families, all of them patients from my husband's renowned fertility clinic, their miracle babies now grown, all looking at the portrait with the same rapt expression. They don't call him Dr. Vance. They don't call him Oliver. In that room, on that day, he is the patriarch. It's not a celebration of mothers. It's a cult meeting, a ceremony to honor the man who gave them their perfect lives, their perfect children. And I am the last living witness to the true foundation of that perfection. I am the one person who knows what happened in the basement of this very house. I am the high priestess who holds the original sin. By excluding me, by shipping me off to the Golden Meadows, they are attempting to silence the last discordant note in their symphony of lies. They are trying to bury the truth with the last person who knows it. Mia? Are you there? Emma's voice cuts through my thoughts, impatient now. A cold clarity settles over me. The fog of grief and fear that has clouded my existence for 50 years begins to burn away, replaced by the stark, clean lines of anger. They think I am a relic, a fragile old woman who can be packed away in a box. They have forgotten who I am. They have forgotten what I have survived. I'm here, Emma, I say. And for the first time in a long time, my voice is my own. It is low and steady, and it does not waver. Thank you for the call. I don't wait for her reply. I place the receiver back in its cradle, the click echoing in the profound silence of the house. The sound is not an ending. It is a beginning. It is the cocking of a gun. The silence that rushes back in isn't empty anymore. It's filled with purpose. The war has begun. I don't move from the chair for a long time. I just sit, letting the silence press in, letting the full weight of their betrayal settle. Then, slowly, I rise. My joints ache, a protest from 80 years of carrying secrets. I begin to walk through the rooms of my home, but my feet don't feel like they're on the polished hardwood floors I've cleaned 1,000 times. They feel like they are treading on ghosts. Every object in this house is a testament to my husband Oliver's suffocating control. The grand piano in the living room that I was never allowed to play, only to dust. It's a statement piece, Mia, not a toy, he'd said. The shelves of leather-bound books that he never read, their spines perfectly aligned, a facade of intellect, the abstract art on the walls, chosen not for beauty, but for its investment potential. This wasn't a home we built together. It was his museum, and I was the chief curator, the live-in exhibit, the woman who smiled prettily at his dinner parties and never, ever contradicted him. This house is the pristine, temperature-controlled vault where he kept his monstrous secrets, and I was his most prized possession, the one who knew everything and said nothing. My slow, deliberate path takes me to the end of the main hallway, to the one door that has been locked for the 20 years since his death. His study. Even now, 2 decades later, the air around it feels colder. I run my fingers over the heavy oak. He kept the only key. After he died, Liam, ever the dutiful son, suggested we keep it locked. To preserve his sanctuary, he'd said. To preserve the evidence, I now understand. I press my forehead against the cool wood, and the past rises up to meet me, not as a memory, but as a physical sensation. A flashback, sharp and brutal, hits me. I'm 30 years old again, standing at the top of the basement stairs. Oliver is at the bottom, looking up at me. He has just come out of the lab, as he called it. He's still wearing his white coat. He's smiling, but his eyes, the same brilliant blue as our son's, are as cold as a winter sky. "Did you hear anything, my love?" he asks. His voice is calm, a gentle murmur that could soothe the most anxious patient. It's the voice that made him a god in this town, a celebrated fertility doctor who performed miracles. I shake my head, my throat tight. No, Oliver, nothing. He nods slowly, still smiling. He starts up the stairs, his steps measured, unhurried. He stops one step below me, so we are eye to eye. He reaches out and tucks a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his touch feather-light and terrifying. "Good," he says, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because what happens down there is a sacred trust. We are giving people miracles, Mia. The thing they want most in the world, a child. You are a part of that, a vital part." He pauses, letting the weight of his words sink in. He moves his hand from my hair to my cheek, cupping it gently. "Your silence is their happiness. Your silence is our security. This house, Liam's future, everything we have, it's built on that silence. You understand, don't you?" It wasn't a question. It was a command, a threat, wrapped in the language of love and shared purpose. I was a part of it. My complicity was the price of admission to this life. He wasn't just a monster who did monstrous things in the dead of night. He was a master of psychological warfare. He had convinced me that my silence was a noble sacrifice, that my ignorance was a form of protection for the desperate couples who came to our door seeking hope. He made me a partner in his crime by convincing me it was a holy act. The memory fades, leaving the bitter taste of old fear in my mouth. The trauma isn't just in the past. It's in the walls, embedded in the plaster. It's in the floorboards that still remember his heavy tread. It's in the very air I breathe, thick with the residue of unspoken truths. For 50 years I have lived with this poison inside me. My complicity, forced upon me as it was, has been a slow-acting acid, eating away at my soul until I barely recognize myself. I looked in the mirror and saw only the ghost of the woman I might have been. This house isn't just my prison. I have been its willing warden. I locked the doors from the inside every single night. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room, striping the floor like prison bars. The doorbell chimes, a polite, two-note sound that announces the arrival of my son, my jailer. I open the door to find Liam standing on the porch, a perfect picture of casual wealth in his tailored polo shirt and expensive slacks. He is the walking, talking image of his father, the same confident smile, the same piercing blue eyes, the same effortless charm that hides a core of pure, unyielding steel. He is Oliver's greatest success and his greatest lie. "Mom," he says, leaning in to kiss the air beside my cheek. He smells of cologne and money. "You're looking well." "Am I?" I ask, stepping back to let him in. He walks past me into the house as if he still owns it, his eyes scanning the room, checking that everything is in its proper place. He has always been obsessed with surfaces, with appearances. He is utterly, willfully blind to the rot that lies just beneath the perfect polish. "Emma told me she called you," he says, turning to face me. He doesn't look guilty. He looks righteous. "I hope you understand, Mom. It's for the best. We want to preserve Dad's legacy, the community he built. The brunch has become something more, a tradition. It needs to be handled with care. Preserve his legacy." The words are a mantra for him, a sacred text. He truly believes it. He believes his father was a saint, a pioneer who brought joy to the world. He has no idea that the community his father built is a web of deceit, and he is the spider at its center. He gestures to the large, polished dining table, the one where we ate thousands of silent, tense meals. "Can we sit down for a moment? There's something we need to discuss." I follow him, my movements slow and deliberate. I feel strangely calm, like an observer watching a play I already know the ending to. He doesn't sit, but instead places his leather briefcase on the table and clicks it open. He pulls out a thick stack of documents, bound in a neat blue folder. He slides it across the gleaming surface toward me. The sound is like ice cracking. "Estate planning," he says, his tone all business. It's the voice he uses in the boardroom, I imagine. Confident, clear, leaving no room for argument. It's long overdue. With things being what they are, your age, your health, it's the responsible thing to do. This transfers the deed of the house into the Vance family trust. It consolidates everything, makes it cleaner, more secure, protects the assets. He wants the house. He wants the epicenter of the secret, the headquarters of the lie, the vault itself. I look down at the papers, legalese, signatures, the formal architecture of my own erasure. I look up at my son, my child, the first of Oliver's experiments. And he's looking at me not as his mother, but as a liability, a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tied up and put away. A flicker of the old fear rises in my throat. The fear of Oliver's quiet disapproval, of his cold anger, the fear of being left with nothing. It's a conditioned response, honed over 50 years of survival. For a lifetime, I have acquiesced. I have nodded and smiled and signed where I was told to sign. It was easier than fighting. It was safer. But then I see Emma's smug, triumphant face in my mind's eye. I hear her syrupy voice talking about the golden meadows. I feel the cold finality of that locked study door against my forehead. And a lifetime of swallowed screams, of bitten-back retorts, of silent, impotent rage begins to coalesce. It gathers from every corner of this silent house, from every poisoned memory, and it rises up not as a shout, but as a single, quiet, immovable object in the center of my being. I meet my son's gaze. He's already looking past me, probably thinking about his next meeting, his golf game, the logistics of selling off my belongings. I let the silence stretch, thick and heavy. I watch the impatience flicker in his eyes. He opens his mouth to speak, to push me, to tell me where to sign. And I say the word I haven't truly said to a man in my family for 50 years. No. It's not loud. It's barely a whisper. But it lands in the silent room with the force of a thunderclap. Liam freezes. His mouth hangs open slightly. He blinks, as if he's heard a dog speak. The shock on his face is so pure, so absolute, it's almost comical. He is a man who has never been told no by a woman in his life, least of all me. "What?" he says, his voice a disbelieving croak. "What did you say?" "I said no," I repeat, and this time my voice is stronger, firmer. The fear is still there, a hummingbird's frantic beat in my chest, but alongside it is something new, something I haven't felt since I was a young woman with dreams of her own. It's the fizzing, electric thrill of power, the exhilarating shock of taking up space, of having a will and expressing it. It's terrifying, and it is glorious. "Mom, don't be ridiculous," he sputters, recovering slightly, falling back on his usual tactic of paternalistic dismissal. "This is just paperwork. It's for your own good. Let me show you where." "I will not be signing anything, Liam," I say, cutting him off. I push the blue folder back across the table toward him, and I will not be discussing the transfer of my home. This conversation is over. He stares at me, his handsome face a mask of confusion and burgeoning anger. He is seeing a stranger. The compliant, quiet, agreeable ghost who haunted this house is gone. In her place sits a woman he does not know, a woman who is looking at him with eyes that are finally, terrifyingly clear. The decision is made, forged in the fire of this one small act of defiance. They think they can erase me. They think they can write the final chapter of my life and close the book. They are wrong. I will not be the loose end. I will not be the forgotten secret. I have been the keeper of the flame for 50 years, guarding the darkness. Now, I will be the one who uses it. I will be the one who lights the match. And I will burn their perfect world to the ground. My fingers, gnarled and stiff, felt clumsy and foreign as they hovered over the slick, cold glass of my phone. Each icon was a tiny, indecipherable hieroglyph. A simple phone call felt like trying to defuse a bomb. My breath caught in my chest, a tight, painful knot. For decades, my world had been shrinking, deliberately curtailed by Oliver, until it consisted of these 4 walls, this garden, these silent, suffocating rooms. Now, I felt the true consequence of that isolation. I was a ghost, unable to interact with the world that had moved on without me. I had no one. The friends from my youth were long gone, and the women I'd known during my marriage were Oliver's friends, not mine. They were members of his congregation, believers in the myth he had so carefully constructed. To them, I was just the quiet, smiling wife, a relic. But there was one, a single, tenuous thread, Noah, my grandson. He was 17, a creature of his generation who seemed to communicate more fluently through taps and swipes than with spoken words. He lived in a world of glowing screens and tangled charging cables, a world I couldn't begin to navigate. He was quiet, observant, and held an almost invisible distance from his parents, a quality I'd always found curious. I'd see him at family dinners, his head bent over his phone, a subtle shield against Liam's booming pronouncements and Emma's brittle cheerfulness. I saw a flicker of myself in that retreat. To call him was a risk. He was Liam's son. How much of his father, of his grandfather, was in him? But what choice did I have? I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and he was the only handhold in sight. I took a shaky breath and found his name in my contacts, the letters blurry through the film of unshed tears. The phone rang once, twice. I almost hung up, my courage failing. "Grandma?" His voice was a low mumble, tinged with the typical teenage impatience of being interrupted. "Noah, dear, it's Mia." My own voice sounded thin, reedy. I cleared my throat. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." No, I'm just doing homework." The universal excuse. I could hear the faint, frantic clicking of a keyboard in the background. A video game, most likely. I was wondering, I need a bit of help with something, a project. I twisted the fabric of my sleeve, the lie feeling thick and clumsy on my tongue. "I have all these old boxes of family photographs, from when your father was a boy, even before. I'd like to get them onto the computer. Digitize them, I think is the word, so they're not lost." There was a pause. I could picture him, frowning at his screen. "Digitize? You mean like scan them?" "Yes, that's it. Scan them. My old scanner, well, it doesn't seem to want to speak to my computer anymore." "And I know you're so clever with these things." The flattery felt cheap, but necessary. Another pause, longer this time. "Liam couldn't help?" "Oh, you know your father," I said, forcing a light laugh. "He's so busy with the foundation, with everything. I wouldn't want to bother him with my sentimental little projects." The lie worked, because it was so close to the truth. Liam had no time for sentiment that didn't serve the legacy of the patriarch. "I guess I could come over Saturday," he said, his reluctance audible. "I have a portable scanner I use for school stuff." "Oh, thank you, Noah. That would be wonderful. Truly." My relief was so profound it almost buckled my knees. When Saturday arrived, the house felt different with him in it. He set up his equipment on the heavy mahogany dining table, a sleek black device, and a laptop that looked impossibly thin. He was taller than I remembered, with the same dark, intelligent eyes as Oliver, but without the cold glint of possession. He worked methodically, his movements efficient as he fed one photograph after another into the scanner. The room filled with the soft whir of the machine, a gentle sound in the oppressive silence. I sat in one of the dining chairs, ostensibly to supervise, but really, I was just watching him, watching for any sign of Liam's arrogance or Emma's cruelty. But I saw neither. I saw a quiet concentration, a seriousness that seemed older than his 17 years. He didn't make small talk, and for that, I was grateful. I didn't have the strength for it. The hours passed. Images of the past flickered onto the laptop screen. A young Liam, grinning with a missing front tooth. Me, younger, my smile not yet a permanent, rigid mask, holding him on a beach. Oliver, always standing slightly apart, watching, his expression unreadable. Each photo was a pang, a reminder of the life I had convinced myself was real. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the polished wood, Noah stopped. He swiveled in his chair and looked at me, really looked at me, his brow furrowed. "You've been sitting there for 3 hours, Grandma. You haven't even had a glass of water." I blinked, startled out of my reverie. "Oh, I suppose I haven't. Is everything okay? He asked, his voice softer now. The question was simple, a polite courtesy, but his eyes held a genuine concern that disarmed me completely. It was the first time anyone had asked me that question with any sincerity in years, maybe decades. The usual response rose to my lips. I'm fine, dear. Just a bit tired. It was an automatic reflex, the armor I'd worn for half a century. But looking at his young, open face, at the flicker of his grandfather's intelligence mixed with a compassion that was entirely his own, the lie died in my throat. The dam of my composure, already cracked and straining, finally broke. My chin began to tremble. I pressed my lips together, but it was no use. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path through the fine wrinkles on my cheek. No, Noah, I whispered, the words tasting of rust and long disused truth. I'm not. He didn't recoil. He didn't look away or make a joke to dispel the tension, as Liam would have. He just watched me, his gaze steady. He reached over and, with a hesitation that spoke volumes, placed his hand over my trembling one on the table. His hand was warm and strong. What's wrong? He asked, his voice low and firm. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. The truth was a monster too large and too hideous to unleash so suddenly. But in that moment, as his warmth seeped into my cold skin, I knew I was no longer completely alone. I had found a crack in the foundation of my prison, and through that crack, a tiny, fragile ray of hope was shining in. The days that followed were a blur of anxious waiting. I moved through the house like a wraith, the conversation with Noah replaying in my mind. His quiet concern had planted a seed, but hope needed more than just a sympathetic ear. It needed fertile ground. It needed proof. My mind, frantic, churned through 50 years of memories, sifting through the silt of my life with Oliver, searching for something solid, something tangible, and then it surfaced. A memory so vivid, it was almost a physical sensation. The rose garden. Specifically, one bush. It was a black baccarat, its petals the color of deep, dried blood. It was Oliver's prize. He tended to it with a chilling, obsessive devotion that he never showed to me or even to Liam. He would spend hours on his knees before it, his long surgeon's fingers meticulously pruning, feeding, and cultivating the soil. He had a standing rule, one of the many unassailable edicts of our life together. No one was to touch the black baccarat. He'd always said its root system was exceptionally delicate and had to remain undisturbed. It was for the health of the plant, he'd explained with that placid, condescending smile. A lie. I knew it now with every fiber of my being. Why would a man so obsessed with control and legacy be so protective of a single flower's roots unless they were concealing something? The plan that formed was reckless, born of sheer desperation. I waited until Noah's next visit, ostensibly to finish the photo scanning project. I brewed tea, my hands shaking so badly the porcelain cup rattled in its saucer. He was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, a watchful quiet. He knew something was wrong. Noah, I began, my voice a little too high, a little too bright. Looking at all these old pictures has made me remember something. Something your grandfather and I did, a long time ago. He looked up from his laptop, his expression skeptical. Yeah? Yes, it sounds silly, I know, but we buried a time capsule. The lie felt enormous, preposterous. Right after we moved into this house, we wrote letters to the future to Liam. We put in a few special things. We buried it in the garden to be opened on our 50th wedding anniversary. I let out a shaky, manufactured sigh. Of course, with Oliver gone, I forgot all about it. Until now. He stared at me, his dark eyes searching my face. He was smart. Too smart for such a sentimental story. I could see the disbelief warring with the concern he still felt. A time capsule? He said flatly. I know. It's foolish. But it suddenly feels very important that I find it. To see what he wrote. To have a piece of him back. I let my voice crack on the last words, hating the manipulative performance, but knowing it was necessary. I was using his empathy, his goodness, as a tool. The thought made my stomach churn with guilt. "Where did you bury it?" he asked, his tone still wary. "By his favorite rosebush," I said, my heart starting to pound. "The dark red one, the black baccara. He said it would mark the spot forever." Noah was silent for a long moment. He closed his laptop. "You want to go digging in the garden? In the middle of the night?" It wasn't a question. "The neighbors," I faltered. "I don't want them to see. They'll think the old woman has finally lost her mind." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Okay," he said, surprising me. "Okay, Grandma, let's go dig up your time capsule." He must have seen the raw, undiluted desperation in my eyes. It wasn't about a time capsule, and he knew it. It was about something much more important. Later, when the neighborhood was dark and silent, we crept out the back door. The air was cool and damp, smelling of wet earth and night-blooming jasmine. The moon was a pale sliver, casting just enough light to turn the familiar shapes of the garden into a strange, alien landscape. I held an old flashlight, its beam trembling in my hand, while Noah carried 2 shovels from the garden shed. We stood before the black baccara. In the moonlight, its blooms looked black, like velvet wounds against the silvery leaves. "Here?" Noah whispered. "Here," I confirmed, my voice a dry croak. The first plunge of the shovel into the soft, manicured earth felt like a sacrilege. It was a violation of Oliver's most sacred space. For years, I had watched him tend this spot, and now we were tearing it apart. The rhythmic scrape and thud of the shovels was the only sound, a frantic heartbeat in the stillness. We dug for what felt like an hour, my back aching, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was about to lose hope, to believe I had imagined it all, that I truly was a foolish, paranoid old woman. Then, Noah's shovel hit something with a dull, metallic clank. "Whoa," he breathed. "Got something." We dropped to our knees, digging at the soil with our bare hands like frantic animals. My fingers, scraped and raw, brushed against cold, hard metal. It was a box, a heavy steel box about the size of a shoebox, its surface pitted with rust. There was a formidable-looking lock on the front. Together, we heaved it out of the hole. It was surprisingly heavy. We carried it inside, leaving a trail of dirt on the pristine kitchen floor. I didn't care. We set it on the table under the stark kitchen light. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. I felt as though I was about to open my own tomb. "It's locked," Noah stated the obvious. He went back to the shed and returned with a crowbar. With a grunt of effort, he wedged the tip into the seam and pushed. The metal groaned in protest. Then, with a loud, sickening screech, the lock broke and the lid sprang open. We both peered inside, our breath held. There were no yellowed letters, no sentimental photographs, no trinkets from a life shared. The first thing I saw, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was the cold, sterile gleam of metal. Syringes, vials, a speculum, a set of forceps. They were terrifyingly familiar, instruments from a nightmare I had tried to bury for 50 years. Beneath them lay a stack of 5 leather-bound journals, their covers embossed with Oliver's initials. O.V. Noah reached in and lifted one out. He opened it. The pages were filled, edge to edge, with a dense, meticulous script. But it wasn't English. It was a complex cipher, a cascade of numbers and symbols, precise and orderly and utterly indecipherable. "What is this?" Noah whispered, his voice full of awe and confusion. I stared at the box, at the cold instruments and the secret books. The truth. It wasn't in a love letter. It was here, in the language of monsters. This wasn't a time capsule. It was a ledger. And as the stench of old paper and buried secrets filled the air, I knew we hadn't just unearthed a box. We had unearthed the real Oliver Vance. The discovery of the box changed everything. The tentative hope I'd felt flickered into a dangerous, terrifying fire. For Noah, the journals were an irresistible puzzle. The quiet, distant teenager was gone, replaced by a focused, almost obsessive young man. The code was a challenge to his intellect, a mountain he was determined to climb. He didn't ask any more questions about time capsules. He knew, on some instinctual level, that the contents of that box were far more important. "I can crack this," he'd said, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that reminded me so much of Oliver, it sent a chill down my spine. But Noah's obsession wasn't rooted in ego, it was rooted in a thirst for truth. He took the journals and the box of instruments to his room, promising to be careful. "I have some software. It can run probability analysis on symbol frequency. It might take some time, but it's doable." I didn't ask where a 17-year-old got such software. I didn't want to know. I just nodded, placing my fragile, explosive hope into his hands. The next few days were the longest of my life. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a held breath, of a bomb waiting to detonate. I paced the floors, my mind a maelstrom of fear and anticipation. What horrors were written in that coded script? Was I truly ready to face them? Part of me, the part that had survived by being small and quiet for 50 years, wanted to call Noah and tell him to stop, to burn the journals, to rebury the box and the secrets within it. But the other part of me, the part that was newly, painfully awake, knew there was no going back. The first email arrived late on a Tuesday night. The subject line was a single stark word: success. My hand trembled as I clicked it open. There was an attachment, a PDF file. I opened it. On the screen was a scanned image of one of the journal pages, the elegant, coded script filling the top half. Below it was Noah's translation. It wasn't a diary entry in the traditional sense. It was a log, clinical, detached, monstrous. Entry 17, subject, LV, MV, diagnosis, male factor infertility, oligospermia. Proposed solution, donor insemination. Client agreed, April 1978. Procedure scheduled. My own initials, my own diagnosis. The clinical coldness of it stole the air from my lungs. I scrolled down, my vision blurring. Entry 18, subject LV, MV, procedure update, May 1978, donor sample substituted. My contribution utilized. Successful implantation confirmed via blood test, subject MV, unaware of substitution. Patriarchal lineage secured, Project Chimera, Phase 1 complete. Patriarchal lineage secured. My contribution, the words swam before my eyes. He hadn't used an anonymous donor, he had used himself. Liam, my son. He wasn't the product of a desperate, loving choice we had made together. He was an experiment. The first one. Project Chimera. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. The monstrous ego required to not only commit such an act, but to document it so meticulously, as if it were a grand scientific achievement. It was unimaginable. I felt the room tilt. The smell of antiseptic, a phantom scent from the basement clinic all those years ago, filled my nostrils. I remembered the cold table, Oliver's reassuring voice telling me it was a simple, sterile procedure, that a kind, anonymous man was giving us the gift of a family. I remembered the faces of the other women who came to the house through a private entrance, women I would greet with tea and gentle smiles while they waited for their miracle. They were hopeful, desperate, trusting, and I, his wife, had been the welcoming face of his lie, the matron of his genetic conquest. My complicity, coerced and unknowing as it was, washed over me not as guilt, but as a physical contamination. I felt dirty, a co-conspirator in a crime so profound it had no name. Another email arrived, then another. Noah was working furiously, breaking the code page by page. He sent them, as he finished them, a relentless cascade of truth. Patient 34. ES. Successful implantation. May 1998. My contribution. Patient 52. LM. Successful. October 2005. My contribution. Patient 71. AK. Unsuccessful. Retrying with new protocol. January 2011. My contribution. On and on it went, dozens of them. A secret dynasty spawned from his clinical god complex. All those children, all those families built on the foundation of his monumental deceit. He hadn't just been a doctor. He had been a predator, seeding his own DNA across the Pacific Northwest, creating a legacy not of healing, but of violation. I stumbled to the bathroom and retched, my body trying to expel a poison that had been living inside me for 50 years. When the sickness passed, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the face of an old woman, pale and hollow-eyed. But for the first time, the woman staring back wasn't a victim. The guilt was still there, a leaden weight in my soul, but it was now forged into something else. It was a weapon. It was a purpose. This was no longer just about me and my stolen life. It was about ES and LM and AK and all the other initials in that horrifying ledger. It was about their children, who were living lies, just like my son. The patriarch had wanted to secure his lineage. I would be the one to dismantle it, piece by bloody piece. The first counterattack came sooner than I expected, and it was as brutal and efficient as Oliver himself would have been. A courier, a young man with an impassive face, arrived at my door on a rainy Thursday morning. He handed me a thick envelope and asked for my signature on a digital tablet. I signed, my hand surprisingly steady. Inside the envelope was a legal notice, bound in a crisp blue cover. Petition to establish conservatorship. I read the words, but my mind struggled to grasp their meaning. The petitioners were Liam Vance and his wife, Emma Vance. They were petitioning the Superior Court of Washington to have me, Mia Vance, declared mentally incompetent and unable to manage my own affairs. My legs gave out, and I sank into the nearest armchair, the papers rattling in my lap. I read on, my horror mounting with every sentence. They cited my increasing confusion, my paranoid delusions regarding the family's legacy, and my recent erratic and disturbing behavior. Attached were sworn affidavits. One was from my next-door neighbor, Margaret, describing with deep concern how she had seen me digging frantically in the garden in the middle of the night, muttering to myself. Another was from a family friend, who testified that I had seemed agitated and disconnected from reality at our last encounter. They were twisting my desperation into dementia, my search for truth into madness. It was a classic, vicious maneuver designed to strip me of my credibility, my autonomy, and my home. They wanted to put me away in the Golden Meadows, not just to get rid of me, but to silence me, to make me a non-person whose wild accusations could be easily dismissed as the ravings of a senile old woman. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. They were boxing me in, using the very system designed to protect people to utterly destroy me. For a moment, the old fear returned, the familiar impulse to surrender, to retreat into the silence they had prepared for me. But then, I thought of the journals. I thought of Oliver's cold, meticulous script, and I thought of his final, arrogant mistake. In his desire to control everything, he had also controlled the money. For decades, he had deposited a generous sum into a private bank account under my name every month. It was never spoken of. It was my allowance, my reward for being the perfect, silent wife. It was the price of my complicity. Oliver, in his hubris, had left me with a war chest. I went to my desk, my movements now filled with a grim resolve. I wouldn't be looking for a slick, expensive lawyer from one of the downtown Bellevue towers. They were Liam's kind of people. I needed someone different. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying over the keys with a newfound confidence, and typed "Tenacious Underdog Lawyers Seattle" into the search bar. I scrolled past the polished firms with their stock photos of smiling partners. I was looking for a fighter, not a corporate shark. My search led me to a small, unassuming website for a lawyer named James Harper. His photo showed a young man, maybe 35, with tired eyes, a slightly crooked tie, and a look that suggested he ran on caffeine and indignation. He wasn't a public defender, but his bio said he specialized in fighting for the little guy against powerful institutions. His office was a small suite above a coffee shop in Fremont. He was perfect. I called and made an appointment for the next day. When I walked into his cluttered office, it smelled of stale coffee and dusty legal books. James Harper looked even more tired in person. He listened patiently as I began my story, his expression a careful, professional neutral. I could see the skepticism in his eyes as I spoke of my son, the house, the pressure to move into a home. He was likely classifying me, filing me away as another elderly parent in a sad, common family dispute over inheritance. "Mrs. Vance," he said when I paused, his voice gentle but firm. "Allegations of undue influence are very difficult to prove. Your son and daughter-in-law, having you evaluated for competency, while it feels cruel, is a standard legal tactic in these situations. We can fight it, but it will be an uphill battle." "It's more than that," I said, my voice low. "It's not just about the house. It's about why they want the house. It's about my husband." He leaned back, a flicker of weariness crossing his face. He thought I was about to unload a lifetime of marital grievances. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of the first page Noah had decrypted, the page about me, about Liam. I slid it across the desk to him. "This is a translation of a page from my late husband's private journal," I said. "My husband was Dr. Oliver Vance." James picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the top portion, the explanation of the cipher. Then his gaze dropped to the translated text. He read it once. Then he read it again, slower this time, his mouth falling slightly open. The professional mask dissolved, replaced by an expression of pure, horrified disbelief. He looked up from the page, his tired eyes now wide and sharp, fixed on me. The air in the small, dusty office suddenly felt charged, electric. "My contribution," he read aloud, his voice a whisper. "Project Chimera." He stared at the paper for a long time, the implications sinking in. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a dawning, appalled fascination. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as a rambling old woman, but as the keeper of an explosive, terrifying secret. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice now laced with a steely energy, "tell me everything, and don't leave out a single detail." The first ripple had been sent, the line of defense had been drawn, and for the first time, I had a real ally, a man who understood the law as a weapon and had just been handed the most shocking ammunition of his career. The war had truly begun. The silence in my house had changed. It was no longer the heavy, oppressive quiet of a tomb, but the charged stillness of a field before a lightning strike. It was a silence filled with purpose, and its new sound was the soft, rhythmic click of Noah's keyboard in the dim light of Oliver's old study. Noah had become my shadow, my co-conspirator. After the initial shock of the journals, a grim determination had settled over him. The boyish softness in his face had sharpened, honed by a truth he should never have had to bear. He didn't speak of it, not directly. We didn't have conversations about Oliver's monstrousness or what it meant that his own father was a product of it. The knowledge sat between us, a shared burden that forged a bond stronger than blood. "He was too meticulous," Noah had said one evening, his eyes tired but bright with a feverish intensity. He gestured at the leather-bound journals stacked on the desk. "This is analog. A man like him, a man obsessed with control and documentation. He'd have a digital backup, an archive, something hidden." It was a chillingly accurate assessment. Oliver had worshipped at the altar of permanence. He believed in records, in data, in evidence of his own greatness. The thought sent a cold dread through me, but also a sliver of hope. More proof, more leverage. So we descended into the basement. It was a place I hadn't entered in 30 years, not since Oliver had declared it his private domain. The air was stale, thick with the smell of damp concrete and forgotten things. In the far corner, behind a stack of dusty wine racks, was his old server. It was an obsolete tower, a beige plastic monolith from another era, humming faintly, a ghost in the machine still drawing power after all these years. "It's encrypted," Noah said, his voice echoing slightly in the cramped space. He ran his hand over the dusty casing. "The whole partition is locked down, but he was arrogant. He probably used a system he designed himself, something he thought no one else could crack." For 3 days, Noah worked. I brought him sandwiches and coffee, watching from the doorway of the study as he stared at scrolling lines of code, his face illuminated by the green and white glow of the monitor. He was a digital archaeologist, patiently, carefully, brushing away the layers of time and deception Oliver had used to bury his sins. I would watch him, my 17-year-old grandson, fighting a battle against a ghost, and feel a surge of love so fierce it was painful, immediately followed by a wave of guilt so profound it threatened to drown me. I had brought him into this. I had tainted his innocence with my secrets. On the third night, well past midnight, the clicking stopped. The silence that followed was different. It was heavy, broken. I walked to the doorway. Noah was leaning back in the chair, his hands limp at his sides. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was staring at his own reflection in the dark glass. "Noah?" I whispered. He didn't turn. "Grandma," he said, his voice rough, hollowed out. "I found it. I wish I hadn't." I came to stand behind him. On the screen was a file directory. The folder was named simply Consultations. Inside were dozens, maybe hundreds of video files, each labeled with a date and a set of initials. Noah clicked on one at random. The image was grainy, shot from a high fixed angle like a security camera. A younger Oliver sat behind his large mahogany desk, his face calm, paternal, radiating a trustworthy authority that made my stomach clench. Across from him sat a couple, their faces tight with a desperate hope. I recognized them, the Parkers. They had lived a few blocks away. Their son, a talented violinist, was Liam's age. "The chances are slim, I must be honest," Oliver said on the video, his voice a soothing balm of practiced empathy. "But miracles happen in this office. We simply have to create the right conditions." He folded his hands, a picture of professional compassion. "The donor profiles are, of course, completely anonymous, but I can assure you, we select only from the most robust genetic stock. Men of intelligence, of health, of talent." The woman, Mrs. Parker, was weeping silently. Her husband held her hand, his knuckles white. "Whatever it takes, doctor," he said, his voice thick. "We'll do whatever it takes." Oliver's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I know you will," he said. "All I require from you is absolute faith. In me, in the process. This is a sanctuary. What happens here is between us and God." Noah clicked the video off. The screen went dark. "He's a predator," Noah whispered, his voice shaking with a rage that was terrifying in its stillness. "He's not a doctor. He's a predator, grooming them." He was right. It wasn't just the biological crime. It was this, the psychological violation. He had preyed on their deepest vulnerability, their desire for a child, and twisted it into a cult of personality. He didn't just give them a baby, he made them believe he was a miracle worker, a god, and they owed him their eternal gratitude. They owed him their silence. "There's more," Noah said, his voice flat now, devoid of emotion. He navigated to another file. This one wasn't a video. It was a link, a web address he'd pulled from a fragmented data log. He clicked it. A Facebook page loaded. It was a private group. The banner image was a professionally shot photo of Oliver, smiling benevolently, with the words, "The Patriarch's Legacy," superimposed in an elegant script. The group's name was The Patriarch's Children. My breath caught in my throat. The administrator's name was listed clearly under the title, Emma Vance, my daughter-in-law. The page was a shrine, a digital scrapbook of delusion. There were over 50 families in the group, 50, and they were all posting photos of smiling children at birthday parties, announcements of graduations from Ivy League schools, videos of soccer goals and piano recitals. Each post was laced with sickeningly sweet praise for the man who made it all possible. "Thinking of our savior, Dr. Vance, today," one woman wrote beneath a photo of her teenage daughter on a horse. "Her equestrian scholarship is a testament to the wonderful genes he blessed us with." "Oliver's grandson just made valedictorian," another post read, shared by Emma herself, referring to some other family's child. "The patriarch's intelligence lives on." I felt a dizzying wave of nausea. These were his children. All of them. An army of unwitting offspring their successes, their talents, their very existence attributed not to their loving parents, but to the genetic legacy of a monster. And Emma was their high priestess, curating their worship, reinforcing the lie. She hadn't just married into the cult. She was actively recruiting for it, maintaining it, protecting it. The Mother's Day party wasn't just a party. It was a congregation. I looked at the photos, at the faces of these children. A boy with Oliver's sharp jawline, a girl with his deep-set eyes. They were everywhere, echoes of him scattered across the manicured suburbs of Bellevue. They were Liam's half-siblings, and they had no idea. "Noah," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "can you?" He was already ahead of me. His fingers flew across the keyboard, executing a series of commands. A small window popped up on the screen, a progress bar slowly filling. "I'm downloading the complete member list," he said, his eyes fixed on the screen. Names, profiles, every photo they've ever posted, every comment. He looked at me then, and in his eyes I saw the last of his boyhood burn away, leaving behind the cold, hard glint of a warrior. "We have them, Grandma," he said. "We have their names and faces. We have all of them." The hum of the server seemed to grow louder, the ghost in the machine finally giving up its dead. We weren't just defending ourselves anymore. We were building an arsenal. The next morning, I sat with James Harper in a small, sterile conference room in his downtown Seattle office. The view of Elliott Bay was stunning, a vast expanse of gray water under a gray sky, but I couldn't appreciate it. My world had shrunk to the stack of papers on the polished table between us. James was young, sharp, with a hunger in his eyes that older, more established lawyers had long since lost. But as he reviewed the single translated page from Oliver's journal and the transcript of the consultation video Noah had found, that hunger was replaced by a look of profound disturbance. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of exhaustion that seemed premature for a man his age. "Mia," he said, his voice low and serious. "This is monstrous. It's beyond anything I've ever encountered." He paused, choosing his words with care. "But I have to be frank with you. A direct legal assault is a minefield." My heart, which had been beating with a cold, steady rhythm of purpose, sank. "What do you mean?" "Statutes of limitation, for a start," he explained, ticking the points off on his fingers. "Most of these events took place decades ago. Fraud has a time limit. So does medical malpractice. It would be an uphill battle just to get it in front of a judge." He continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Then there's the issue of proof. You have the journals, yes. We have the video, but it's circumstantial. A skilled defense attorney, and believe me, with the Vance family money, they would hire the best, would paint Oliver's words as benevolent deception, a placebo, a way to give desperate people hope. They'll say he was speaking metaphorically about robust genetic stock." He hesitated, looking at me with genuine sympathy. "And then, Mia, there's you. You knew something was wrong. You stayed silent for 50 years. They will put you on the stand and tear you apart. They will call you a bitter old woman, senile, vindictive. They will say you were complicit, and now you're trying to rewrite history to assuage your own guilt. It would become your word against the memory of a beloved town legend. And I'm sorry to say, in a courtroom, that's not a fight we're likely to win." Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling the fragile structure of hope I had built. The legal system, the very institution I thought would deliver justice, was just another fortress protecting men like Oliver. I felt a familiar despair creep in, the cold, heavy cloak of helplessness. I looked out the window at the churning gray water. For 50 years, I had been silent. For 50 years, the truth had been my prisoner. And now, when I was finally ready to set it free, the world was telling me it was too late. The locks were too rusted, the walls too high. But then I thought of Noah's face, pale in the glow of the monitor. I thought of the weeping woman in the video. I thought of the faces of those children on the Facebook page, living lives predicated on a monstrous lie. My despair curdled into something else, something hard and hot. Rage. "Then it can't be about the law," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The words surprised me as they left my mouth. I turned back to James. His expression was one of cautious curiosity. "You're right. The law won't give us justice. The courts won't undo what he did." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "So my revenge cannot be about the law. It must be about the truth." A new plan began to form in my mind. Not a legal strategy, but a campaign of controlled demolition. We wouldn't try to knock down the fortress wall by wall. We would plant a bomb at its foundation and bring the whole rotten structure down on itself. "We don't need a judge," I said, the idea taking shape, gaining momentum. "We need an audience. We need to show them, all of them, the families from the Facebook group, the whole world." James stared at me, a slow understanding dawning in his eyes. He was a man of the law, of statutes and precedents. This was something else entirely. This was scorched earth. When I returned home, I went straight to the journals. I was no longer looking for legal evidence. I was looking for a weapon. I spent hours poring over Oliver's cramped, coded script, now so horribly familiar to me. I wasn't just reading his words. I was learning the geography of his cruelty, mapping the constellation of his victims. I was looking for the perfect crack in the facade. And then I found it. A series of entries from the early 90s. A couple, the Newmans. The notes detailed their struggle, their desperation, and Oliver's successful intervention. A daughter was born 9 months later. Scarlett. But a later entry, years after, caught my eye. It was a clipped, dismissive note Oliver had made after running into the family at a town event. He mentioned their daughter, now a teenager, had been diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder, Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a progressive nerve disorder. My blood ran cold. I knew that name. It wasn't just a random medical term, it was a shadow that had haunted the edges of Oliver's own family. His uncle had it, a cousin. It was a dominant gene, passed down through his bloodline, a flaw in the robust genetic stock he was so proud of. He had known. He had known the risk, however small, and he had passed his own corrupted legacy onto this innocent child. He had given this family not a miracle, but a curse. I found them online. They weren't wealthy or influential. They didn't live in a multi-million-dollar home in Bellevue. They lived in a modest rambler in Tacoma. The father had passed away. The mother, Eleanor, worked as a receptionist. There was no Ivy League acceptance for Scarlett. Her social media profile showed a young woman in her late 20s, her posts documenting a quiet life, punctuated by hospital visits and struggles with mobility. There was no mention of Dr. Vance, no worship of the patriarch. There was only the quiet, grinding reality of her inheritance. I found Eleanor Newman's phone number. Making that call was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I explained who I was, my voice trembling slightly. I told her I had some information about Dr. Vance's clinic, information that might be relevant to her daughter. She was hesitant, suspicious. Why now? Why me? I didn't push. I simply asked if she and Scarlett would be willing to meet me for coffee. I said I would bring proof. Something in my voice, perhaps the raw edge of my own grief, must have convinced her. She agreed. We met in a quiet, anonymous cafe halfway between our homes. The air smelled of burnt coffee and sugar. Scarlett sat beside her mother, her hands resting on the handle of a cane that leaned against her chair. She was pale, with tired, intelligent eyes that held a lifetime of pain. She looked at me with open skepticism. I didn't begin with accusations or dramatic revelations. I began with an apology. "I am so sorry," I said, my voice thick. I was his wife. I lived in that house. I knew. I didn't know the specifics, but I knew something was wrong, and I did nothing. My silence makes me complicit in what happened to you, and for that, I am truly sorry. Their expressions softened, just slightly. The wall of their suspicion lowered by a fraction. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I didn't show them the journals at first. I just told them the story. I told them about Oliver's monstrous ego, his God complex, his secret experiments. I told them Liam was my son, and also Oliver's first success. When I finally mentioned the Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, how it ran in Oliver's family. Scarlett's head snapped up, a flicker of dawning horror in her eyes. "How could you know that?" she whispered. I pushed a single translated page from the journal across the table, the page that detailed her own conception and the later entry that dismissed her diagnosis. She read it, her mother looking over her shoulder. I watched as Scarlett's hand began to tremble, her face draining of all color. The grief that had been a constant, low hum in her life began to sharpen, to transform. I saw it happen in real time. The years of quiet suffering, of unanswered questions, of a fate she believed was just bad luck, all coalescing into a single focal point of rage. It was a cold, hard, clarifying rage. "That man," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "That man didn't just give me this disease. He knew, and he did it anyway. He used my parents' pain and gave me this." She gestured to her cane, her eyes blazing with a fire that seemed to burn away all her exhaustion. Her mother was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. But Scarlett wasn't crying. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "What do you want from us?" "I want to burn it all down," I said simply. "I want to expose him for what he was, not for my sake, for yours, for all the others. But I can't do it alone. They'll dismiss me as a crazy old woman. But you are living proof of his crime. You are the face of his legacy." Scarlett was silent for a long moment, her eyes never leaving mine. She was looking for weakness, for deception. She found none. She found only a shared, desolate landscape of betrayal. She picked up her cane and used it to push herself straighter in her chair. "My whole life, doctors have told me this was a 1-in-a-million fluke, a genetic lottery I lost." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "It wasn't a lottery. It was a death sentence, hand-delivered by a man everyone called a saint." She looked from me to her weeping mother, and a final, terrible resolve settled on her face. "All right," she said, her voice like flint. "I'll help you. What do we have to lose? He already took everything." The sun shone on Mother's Day with a kind of cruel, oblivious perfection. It streamed through the windows of my living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The house was quiet. Too quiet. For the first time in my memory, I was not getting dressed to go to Liam and Emma's. I was not preparing to smile through gritted teeth as my daughter-in-law held court. Today, my house was not a prison. It was a command center. I could picture the scene at their home with perfect clarity, the sprawling, professionally landscaped backyard overlooking Lake Washington, the multi-million-dollar view, the caterers in crisp white jackets circulating with trays of champagne and canapes, the women in their floral dresses and expensive sandals, their laughter bright and brittle, the men in their pastel polo shirts talking about stocks and golf swings, and the children, the beautiful, successful, celebrated children playing on the lush green grass, the living, breathing proof of the patriarch's benevolence. The elites of Bellevue, all bound by their shared, gilded lie, toasting to the memory of the man who had given them their perfect families. In my small, quiet living room, the atmosphere was entirely different. It was electric with dread and a terrifying, thrilling anticipation. James was here. He wasn't acting as a lawyer today. He was a witness, a strategist, a steadying presence. He paced slowly back and forth in front of the fireplace, his phone in his hand, not speaking, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was running through every possible legal repercussion, every potential blowback. He was preparing for the war that would follow this first, decisive battle. Noah sat at a makeshift desk we'd set up by the window, his laptop open. He was a statue of focused energy. On his screen were two windows. One held the email he had drafted, a digital bomb constructed with cold, precise language. The other held the anonymous, secure website he had built overnight, a stark white page that would soon become a gallery of horrors. He hadn't spoken much all morning. He just drank his coffee, his eyes fixed on the time in the corner of his screen. His fingers were poised above the keyboard, ready. And then there was me. I sat in my armchair, the one Oliver used to favor, the worn leather cool against my skin. I was wearing a simple black dress. I was in mourning, not for him, but for all the lives he had destroyed, for the woman I had been, for the mother I had failed to be. My heart was a wild bird, hammering against the cage of my ribs. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a drumbeat, counting down. Tick, the clink of champagne glasses. Tock, a child's happy shriek. Tick, Emma, preparing to give her speech. Tock, my breath catching in my throat. I was a ghost at their feast. They had tried to erase me, to file me away in a home with a pleasant name, to silence the last witness. But I was still here, and I was about to remind them, and all the others, that the past is never truly dead. It's not even past. I thought of Scarlett. I pictured her in her small apartment in Tacoma, her own phone ready. She was our secret weapon, the human heart of our cold, digital assault. She was about to turn her pain into a beacon, a story that would flash across a million screens, impossible to ignore. A knot of guilt tightened in my stomach. The children, those innocent children playing on the lawn. Their lives were about to be fractured, their identities shattered. Was this right? To visit the sins of the father upon the children? But what other choice was there? Their entire existence was a sin, a product of a monumental crime. The truth, however brutal, was the only antidote to the poison of the lie they were living. It was a painful, necessary surgery. I looked at Noah. He felt my gaze and turned his head, his young face old with the weight of our purpose. He gave me a single, grim nod. We were ready. I watched the clock on the mantel. 1:10 p.m. 1:12. I could almost hear it, the sound of Emma tapping a spoon against her champagne flute to get everyone's attention. I could see her, smiling her brilliant, false smile, her eyes sweeping over the crowd of adoring followers. For every mother celebrating a lie today, I whispered to the silent room, I am here to deliver the truth. The clock began to chime the quarter hour. 1, 2, 3. It was time. Noah, I said, my voice steady, clear. Now. At exactly 1:15 p.m., as the sun reached its apex over Lake Washington, as the first words of Emma's toast to the patriarch began to drift across the manicured lawn, Noah pressed the enter key. It was a single, silent keystroke in my quiet living room, but it was a detonation. In that perfect backyard, on dozens of phones tucked into pockets and designer handbags, a notification pinged, then another, and another. A cascade of synchronized alerts, a digital ripple spreading through the congregation. A man frowned at his screen. A woman's smile faltered as she glanced at hers. The email arrived in over 50 inboxes simultaneously. The subject line was a masterpiece of cold provocation. An inheritance from Dr. Oliver Vance. Curiosity would have made them open it. Who could resist? A secret inheritance from their savior. Inside there was no lengthy explanation, no rambling manifesto. Just a few, clean, terrifying lines of text. The email contained a link. Clicking it took them to the stark, anonymous website Noah had built. The page contained only 3 things. First, a high-resolution scan of a single page from Oliver's journal. The page where he outlined, in his own coded script, his methodology. The page where he referred to his patients' husbands as unwitting donors and the children as my legacy. The translation was provided in stark, red text beneath it. Second, a video file. It was only 30 seconds long. It was a clip from one of the consultation videos, but this one was different. It was Oliver, alone in his office after a couple had left, speaking into a small audio recorder, making notes. The male subject is sterile, but his pride will not allow him to accept an anonymous donor. Oliver's voice, calm and clinical, filled the silence of the webpage. He is, however, highly susceptible to suggestion. By framing my own contribution as a miracle, a product of a unique clinical environment, he will accept the resulting child as his own. The paternal instinct, once triggered, will overwrite any lingering doubt. The mother is inconsequential. Her desire for a child is the only tool I need. And third, below the image and the video, was the message, the ultimatum. Your family is built on a lie. Dr. Oliver Vance did not use anonymous donors. He used himself. You are not the parents of a miracle. You are the caretakers of his biological children. The full, unredacted proof of Dr. Vance's decades-long genetic experiments, including a complete list of all biological children and their families, will be released to the national press in 24 hours. This can be prevented on one condition. His entire estate, including the Vance Family Trust and all properties, must be legally dissolved and equitably distributed among all his biological children. A formal legal proposal will be delivered to Liam and Emma Vance tomorrow morning. You have 24 hours to compel them to accept. DNA test kits to confirm your child's paternity are in the mail. They were sent via courier this morning. You should receive them by tomorrow. It was a perfectly crafted bomb. It didn't just accuse, it provided proof. It didn't just threaten. It gave them a path to self-preservation, turning them against their leaders, Liam and Emma. And the final, brilliant touch, the DNA kits. A physical, scientific confirmation of the horror, already on its way to their doorsteps. As Noah's email detonated in Bellevue, he opened a second window on his screen. A TikTok live video. Scarlett's face filled the frame. She wasn't in her apartment. She was sitting in her car, the lighting harsh, the audio raw. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with a furious, righteous fire. She wasn't reading from a script. Her words were a torrent of pure, unfiltered pain. "My name is Scarlett Newman," she began, her voice shaking but strong. "For 28 years I was told I was a miracle, the miracle baby of Dr. Oliver Vance's clinic." She took a ragged breath. It was a lie. He didn't give me a miracle. He gave me a disease, a genetic disorder that he carries in his own bloodline. He used my parents' desperation, and he turned me into a lab rat. He did this to me, and he did this to others, dozens of others. Her voice broke on a sob, but she pushed through, her anger cresting. "To everyone in Bellevue who worships him, to all the patriarch's children, your hero was a monster. Your perfect families are a lie, and I am the proof." Noah stared at the screen, his breath held. In the corner of the TikTok video, the viewer count was exploding. 100, 1,000, 10,000. Comments flooded the screen, a waterfall of shock, of horror, of support. The #DrVanceMonster #Scarlett had put in the caption was already starting to trend. The digital bomb had detonated. The shockwave was spreading. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I wasn't in my living room. I was in Liam's backyard. I could feel the sudden, chilling silence. I could see the frozen smiles, the champagne glasses held halfway to lips, the faces turning from their phones to look at each other, their eyes wide with a dawning, unspeakable terror. The garden party was over. The controlled demolition had begun. The digital bomb had a sound. It wasn't a physical explosion, not the deafening crack of dynamite, but a cascade of electronic pings. It was the sound of Noah's laptop, open on my dining room table, chirping with notifications. A symphony of destruction played in email-sent confirmations and rapidly climbing view counters. 100, 1,000, 50,000. Each number was a brick being pulled from the foundation of the House of Vance. James, my lawyer, stood by the window, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He looked like a general watching a battle from a distant hill, his face a mask of professional tension. The email was delivered to all 57 members of the Children of the Patriarch group at 1:15 p.m. precisely, he said, his voice a low hum. Scarlett's TikTok went live at 1:15 and 10 seconds. "And?" I asked. My own voice was surprisingly steady. My hands, resting on the back of a chair, didn't tremble. I had spent a lifetime trembling. The stillness felt foreign, like a limb that had fallen asleep and was only now waking up. Noah turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was Scarlett's face, tear-streaked, but incandescent with rage. Her phone was propped up on her dashboard, the background a blurry suburban street. She wasn't screaming, she was speaking with a chilling, furious clarity. "He called it a gift," she was saying, her voice cracking but never breaking. "A miracle from God delivered by Dr. Vance. It wasn't a gift, it was a violation. My son, my beautiful son, has a genetic disorder, a rare one. The doctors couldn't understand it. Neither my husband nor I are carriers. But now I know. It runs in Oliver Vance's family. He didn't just give me a child. He gave my child his curse. The view counter ticked past 100,000. The comments were a waterfall of shock, horror, and support. Hashtags were already forming. #Vance Vanity. #Dar Deception. #The Patriarchs. Poison. It's working, Noah whispered, his eyes wide. He looked at me, not with the pity of a boy for his frail grandmother, but with a kind of awe. They're sharing it. News outlets are picking up the hashtag. Someone posted a link to Liam and Emma's address. A cold knot tightened in my stomach, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The final act. We didn't have to wait long. By sunset, the local news channels were running live feeds. From my living room, the one Oliver had designed to be a showcase of his success, I watched a helicopter shot of my son's house. The perfectly manicured lawn, the site of the now imploded Mother's Day brunch, was swarming, not with guests in pastel dresses, but with reporters holding microphones like weapons. News vans with satellite dishes sprouting from their roofs lined the curb. It looked like a siege. I could imagine the scene inside. The frantic calls, the dawning, sickening realization in the eyes of friends and neighbors. I pictured Emma, her face a perfect mask of social grace, cracking into a million pieces. I pictured the husbands and wives, looking at the children they had prayed for, and now seeing the ghost of another man in their faces. Oliver's face. Marriages were ending in that house. Lives were being redefined, as before and after. The phone rang. We all jumped. James moved to answer it, but I held up a hand. "Let it ring," I said. It could only be one person. Night fell. The news anchors spoke in grave, serious tones. A scandal of unimaginable proportions is rocking the quiet community of Bellevue tonight. Noah made us coffee. James paced. I sat. I watched the shadows lengthen in my own house, the prison where the truth had been incubated for 50 years. The silence in my home was a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding just a few miles away. This silence was different, though. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of secrets. It was the quiet of a mission accomplished, the deep breath after the scream. Then came the sound I had been waiting for, the squeal of tires on my driveway, a car door slamming with enough force to rattle the windows. Footsteps, heavy and furious, stomping up the path. The front door burst open, crashing against the wall, and there he was, my son. Liam stood in the doorway, framed like a portrait of utter devastation. His suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled. His face was pale, except for 2 burning patches of red on his cheeks. But it was his eyes that held me. I had seen him angry before, but this was something else. This was the rage of a king whose castle had turned to dust around him. It was the howl of a man who had just discovered his entire life. His very identity was a fraud. "You," he breathed, the word a poisoned dart. He ignored James and Noah. His world had shrunk to the space between him and me. He stalked into the room, his fists clenched. He looked around at the furniture, the paintings, the legacy he was meant to inherit. He looked as if he wanted to burn it all to the ground. "How could you?" he finally screamed, the sound echoing in the cavernous room. "How could you do this to us, to this family, to Dad's memory?" For the first time in my life, looking at my son's rage, I felt no fear. The knot of terror that had lived in my stomach for 5 decades was gone. In its place, a strange and profound pity bloomed. I saw not an aggressor, but a victim. The first victim, after me. He was a man-child, flailing in the ruins of a world built for him by a monster he worshipped as a god. My voice, when it came, was as calm as the surface of a still lake. "His memory?" I asked softly. "What memory is that, Liam? The memory of a great man, a benefactor, a miracle worker?" "He was my father," Liam roared, jabbing a finger toward me. "He gave us everything. He built this. And you, with your bitterness and your dementia, you've destroyed it all in one afternoon. For what? Revenge?" "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. I took a step toward him. He flinched, as if my very presence burned him. Not revenge, truth. Truth? He laughed, a raw, ugly sound. You call this truth? Humiliating us? Turning us into a freak show on every television in the country? Emma has locked herself in the bathroom. Her parents are calling. Our friends. They look at me like I'm something contaminated. You are, I said, and the words were not cruel, but factual. We all are. We were contaminated the moment Oliver decided his bloodline was more important than his ethics, his legacy more important than our lives. I looked at this man, my son, and for the first time, I saw the genetic echo of his true father, not in his face, but in his pride, in his blind devotion to the idea of the patriarch. He didn't just betray me, Liam, I said, my voice gaining a strength I didn't know it possessed. He betrayed you. He betrayed every single family he ever helped. He betrayed the very idea of family. You were his wife. You stood by him, he accused, his voice cracking. The rage was beginning to fray at the edges, revealing the raw wound of a little boy underneath. I was his prisoner, I corrected him gently, just as you were his project, his first great success. Do you think he loved you, Liam? Or did he love what you represented, the start of his secret dynasty? He shook his head, a wild, desperate motion. No. He loved me. He was proud of me. He was proud of his work, I said. I walked past him to the large portrait of Oliver that hung over the fireplace. The artist had captured his benevolent smile perfectly, the knowing look in his eyes. It was the same look I saw in the videos, right before he would manipulate another desperate couple. He built this family on a foundation of sand, Liam, on lies and ego and stolen biology. All I did was stop pretending it was rock. He stared at me, his chest heaving. The fight was draining out of him, replaced by a vast, empty horror. He was looking at me, but he was seeing the abyss that had just opened up beneath his feet. His father wasn't a god. His life wasn't a birthright. It was an experiment. My whole life, he whispered. Everything is a lie, I finished for him. I felt a pang of my old maternal instinct, the urge to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay. But it wouldn't be. Not for a long time. And comfort was a luxury we could no longer afford. The lie ends tonight, for all of us. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a galaxy of shattered certainties. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the house. He didn't slam the door this time. He closed it softly, the click of the latch sounding like a final, quiet punctuation mark at the end of a long and terrible chapter. The sound of his car's engine faded into the night, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy, final. James let out a long breath. Noah came and stood beside me, placing a tentative hand on my shoulder. I didn't look at them. I continued to stare at Oliver's portrait. In the dim light, his smile seemed less benevolent, more like a smirk. With a resolve that came from a place deeper than thought, I walked to the fireplace, grabbed the heavy iron poker, and stood before the painting. I didn't say a word. I just swung. The canvas ripped with a satisfying tear, right across his smiling, monstrous face. The sound of Liam's car peeling away from my curb bled into a different sound, a low, mournful horn echoing across water. 6 months had passed. The engine's angry roar was replaced by the patient thrum of a ferry gliding across the Puget Sound. The smell of burnt rubber and fury was gone, replaced by the clean, sharp scent of salt and rain. The house was sold. The day I walked through it for the last time, it was an empty shell, stripped of Oliver's oppressive furniture and suffocating presence. The rooms echoed with every footstep. The stain on the basement floor had been scrubbed away by a professional cleaning crew, but I could still see it. A ghost of a ghost. I didn't feel sadness as I handed the keys to the realtor. I felt like a parolee walking out of the prison gates into the blinding sun. The name Vance was no longer a symbol of Bellevue prestige. It was infamous, a byword for a unique and grotesque kind of scandal. The legal battles, as James had predicted, were just beginning. A tangled, furious web of paternity suits, fraud claims, and class action lawsuits that would likely outlive me. But they were not my battles. I had lit the fire. Now others would tend the flames. I had given them the ammunition. Most of my share of the money from the sale of the house, the money Oliver had used to buy my silence for half a century, was now the seed capital for the Scarlet Foundation, a new nonprofit dedicated to providing legal aid and genetic counseling for victims of fertility fraud. My conversations with James were no longer about my own defense, but about the Foundation's charter. Scarlett and I spoke on the phone weekly. We never talked about Oliver. We talked about the families being helped, about the legislation we were lobbying for. Her anger had been forged into a purpose, and it was a formidable thing to witness. My world is smaller now, and infinitely larger. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a building that overlooks the water. It's clean, bright, and anonymous. The walls are painted a soft, cloud-like gray, and I have hung only one picture, a framed photo of a teenage Noah grinning from a sailboat, the wind in his hair. The silence here is a comfort. It doesn't hold secrets. It holds peace. It's the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the cry of a distant gull, the rhythmic sigh of the waves. It is the sound of my own unburdened heart, finally beating for itself. My relationship with Liam is gone. It was an unavoidable casualty, a part of the wreckage I had to accept. He sent one letter through his lawyer. It was 3 sentences long. It didn't ask how I was. It informed me that he and Emma were divorcing and that he was legally changing his last name. He did not say what he was changing it to. I folded the letter and threw it into the sea from my small balcony. I watched the paper grow dark and heavy and then sink. But I am not alone. Every Sunday, Noah visits. The first few weeks, he was quiet, coiled with a tension that was painful to watch. He was a boy adrift, the anchor of his identity ripped away. He was not the grandson of the great Dr. Vance. He was the grandson of a monster and the biological half-brother of his own father. It was a truth too heavy for a 17-year-old to carry easily. We never talked about his grandfather. It was an unspoken rule. Instead, we talked about his future. Today, he's sitting across from me at my small kitchen table, a stack of college brochures between us. The late afternoon sun streams through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. "This one's in Oregon," he says, sliding a glossy pamphlet toward me. "The University of Portland. They have a great computer science program, and it's far." I nod, understanding everything he isn't saying. Far from Bellevue, far from the name Vance, far from the whispers and the pitying looks. "Oregon is beautiful," I say. "All that green." He picks at the label on his bottle of soda. "I've been thinking a lot about genetics, about code. DNA is just a code, right? 4 letters, A, T, C, and G. Everything that makes us who we are is just a sequence. But it's not everything, is it?" "No," I say softly. "It's the blueprint. It's not the building. You get to be your own architect, Noah. You get to decide what you build." He looks up at me, and for the first time in months, the haunted look in his eyes has receded. What he did, the code he passed on, it doesn't have to be my legacy, does it? "Never," I say, my voice firm. "Your legacy is the one you write for yourself, starting now." He gives me a small, fragile smile. It's a start. He is struggling, yes, but he is free from the lie. And in time, that freedom will be stronger than the pain of the truth. After he leaves, I wrap myself in a thick wool blanket and sit on my balcony. The air is cold, but clean. I watch the ferries, those big, sturdy vessels, gliding across the water, carrying people from one shore to the other, to home, to work, to new beginnings. They move with a steady, reliable purpose. I am alone, but I'm not lonely. For 50 years, silence was an absence, a void where truth should have been. It was the sound of fear, the sound of complicity. Now it is presence. It is peace. It is the vast, open space where I can finally hear my own thoughts, feel my own feelings, without the crushing weight of Oliver's world. A young couple walks along the path below my balcony, holding hands, their laughter carrying on the wind. They are strangers, their lives their own, their secrets their own. I wish them well. I wish them simple, boring, honest lives. The sun dips below the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. A beautiful, violent, glorious end to the day. An ending that promises a new beginning tomorrow. I close my eyes and listen. I listen past the gulls, past the waves, past the distant city hum. I listen to the quiet, steady rhythm inside my own chest. A heart that no longer beats in time with a lie. A heart that is, at long last, beating only for me. Every family has its secrets, its carefully constructed truths. Some are small and harmless, others are foundations built on sand. What lies have you had to dismantle, to find your own peace, to reclaim your own story? Share your journey in the comments below. Your voice matters, and you are not alone.